What is up, Soul Fam? It's Sandal from Substance Over Style, and I'm coming at you today from Ubud. I'm in the jungles of Bali. Here, take a look at this. Take a look at this view from my window. Isn't that pretty? Yeah, I'm just staying with a friend here in Ubud. I did initially try and film this video out by the pool because there's an amazing pool here, like literally surrounded by jungle, and it's really beautiful, but my phone was overheating and switching off. So I decided to come in here where the AC is on, and actually I'm much more liking this because the lighting in here is much nicer and more flattering. So today, I want to talk to you about the toxic feminine, or we can use the language wounded feminine. It's slightly more politically correct because talking about toxic femininity is a little bit of a political hot potato, and that is exactly why we're going to get into it, because it's very, very important. You know, I'm always cutting through bullshit with my sort of truth, like Carly, and self-delusion is one of our greatest enemies, and it's one of the things that keeps us disempowered. And by awakening to our true power, that is how we are going to be able to step into it and level up and become the fully embodied multidimensional beings that we came here to be. So this information, some of you may be triggered by it. I just want you to, if you find yourself getting triggered or personally offended by the information, just try and lean into that trigger and ask yourself why you're getting triggered. This is really, really important. Basic fundamentals of shadow work, that if you get triggered by someone or something, there's usually some aspect of you that thing is kind of hitting upon. It's like a vibrational point of attraction, because we are everything. There is no separation. It's usually mirroring back an aspect of who you are, and there's 7 different mirrors. Like if you want to know more about that, study the cosmic mirrors of the ancient Essenes. They talk about 7 different cosmic mirrors that any kind of anything that triggers you can be highlighting. So yeah, if you're kind of on the natural healing, personal development journey, that's definitely one to look into. That's one that I've looked into myself, and that's helped me along my journey quite a lot. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, the wounded feminine, or the toxic feminine, differs from toxic masculinity quite heavily. So there's been a lot of talk in a post-Me Too world about toxic masculinity, and there's been also a lot of pushback against that conversation from, you know, various camps, like, you know, the alt-right and the MGTOWs and all of that, who talk about toxic femininity. And I've seen a lot of sort of blog posts and videos and things like that talk about toxic femininity, and I don't think that they really have a very deep understanding of these more occult principles, because they seem to be mixing in toxic femininity with toxic masculinity, and not really understanding where the two polar opposites are really at play. Toxic femininity is not just anything toxic that a woman does, because sometimes women can embody toxic masculinity, sometimes men can embody toxic femininity. Generally, the toxic feminine is caused by a right brain imbalance, and the toxic masculine is caused by a left brain imbalance. So the left brain is the hemisphere that rules logic, thought, you know, binary thinking, scientism, that kind of stuff. And imbalances can lead to rigid skepticism, too much dominance, over-dominance, controlling, being very self-oriented. And the converse, the feminine hemisphere of the brain, which rules more kind of creativity, the emotions, compassion, more like less binary thinking, and more kind of like more kind of intuitive and feeling rather than thinking even. So imbalances in the right brain hemisphere can lead to slave think. Left brain causes master think. right brain causes slave think. And we see both of these in our society, not just in interpersonal relationships between men and women, but on a macro level, in societies as well. And that's why people will willingly submit to, you know, totalitarian governments and things like that, generally due to right brain imbalance. It's seen a lot in societies in which religion has become very, very dominant, because becoming dominant in the right brain hemisphere tends to lead to religious fundamentalism, because there is when you become too passive and too yielding and too in your feminine, then you lack that self rulership, that internal monarchy, you know. So you tend to be more service to others rather than service to self. Service to self is more the masculine. It's telling me that my device is too hot. This is what it's like filming in the tropics. Okay, so, you know, if you become dominant in the masculine, then you tend to go towards the very kind of self-orientated, narcissistic end of the spectrum. Now, Ross Rosenberg, in his book Human Magnet Syndrome, which you should definitely read if you're somebody who has issues with narcissism and codependency in your interpersonal relationships, he talks about this as a spectrum, being self-orientated at one end and being others-orientated at the other. One is masculine, one is feminine. And for anybody who studied universal law, this is the principle of rhythm or polarity, as the pendulum swings from one to the other. So to bring yourself back into balance, sometimes you will have to swing from one end of the pendulum. So maybe you're hyper feminine, you may find yourself swinging as you're on your healing journey towards the masculine end of the spectrum, and then it will go flip back and forth until you eventually become back into balance and become self-realized. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So again, and other symptoms of hyperfemininity or right brain imbalance include victim consciousness, so too passive, so tending to blame somebody else for victimizing you, when maybe it might have been your lack of boundaries or your lack of asserting your own boundaries and speaking your truth that actually caused you to become victimized in the first place. Now, I know that that's quite a controversial thing to say, because we live in a culture where people are very sensitive around the idea of victim blaming. But as somebody who's been victimized myself many times, I have, as a woman, like what woman hasn't experienced sexual assault, in toxic relationships. I've been in abusive relationships before, and I know that they don't just happen overnight. They happen generally when you're in a situation where you're very vulnerable and you can't leave. So I'm not saying that people cause themselves to be victimized, but again, truth always lies somewhere in the middle. So instead of just blaming the other, it's important for us to acknowledge the part that we played in order to reclaim our power. Because if we don't, then there's nothing. If there was nothing that you could have done differently, then what's to stop you being victimized again and again and again? Do you understand what I mean? Like, there are things that you can do to prevent yourself from being victimized ever again, and reclaiming those is part of reclaiming your sovereignty and your personal power. Okay, so she becomes too passive, she becomes needy, because she, again, is not generating her own energy, and she's not a source of her own self-love and self-esteem and self-worthiness, so she projects that outwards, and she becomes like a vacuum. So the feminine is basically the zero, the masculine is the one. Feminine is negative, masculine is positive. It's electromagnetism, right? So she magnetizes him to her. So that's why when the feminine is disempowered, she becomes even more, what's the word? Like a vacuum. She becomes even more negative. She becomes all the way to that polar end of the spectrum, because she has no masculine, none of her masculine energy of her own to balance herself out. So she becomes extremely needy, needing to be filled up by the masculine. This can also happen in relation, where the physical sex is different from the energy. So a man can be very, very much in his feminine energy and also become codependent or needy, not have good boundaries, not be able to assert his truth and his wants and his needs and his desires, and lack the sacred masculine principle of courage. And these types of men who are very much in their right brain and very intuitive, very emotional, very passive, and very feminine, tend to be the types of men that become more vulnerable to abuse from women, or, you know, in LGBT relationships, from the masculine partner in the relationship, because we're like magnets. So you become more magnetically drawn to somebody who is who balances you out. So if you're too much in your feminine, then you'll go for somebody who's dominant in their masculine, and they will most likely be an abuser. So again, Ross Rosenberg will talk about this in the human magnet syndrome, that you're actually like magnets, and even though your relationship might be toxic, it will still be compatible. And until you heal yourself and become more balanced in your orientation, you will continue to attract toxic relationships. Again, so right brain imbalance leads to naivety, blind belief, religious extremism, slave think. I already said that. No internal monarchy or rulership, allows others to lead them. Yeah, so a lot of, you know, feminine embodiment and feminine magnetism coaches, femininity coaches, in the dating world will talk a lot about to women who tend to be too much in their masculine, about the power of leaning back and allowing the masculine to lead. But if you are not balanced in your masculine energy as a woman or as a feminine energy being, then you will allow yourself to be led in a direction that does not suit your best interests. So the feminine is, even though feminine energy is surrendering, and it's not passive, but it's yielding. So it will allow the masculine to lead, but she needs to have enough of that self-rulership to be able to say, if she doesn't like the direction that he's taking things, I don't want to go that way. And she needs to be able to have enough of the sacred masculine principle of action to initiate consequences. So say, I don't want to go that way, and if you insist on leading us down that direction, I'm going to do my own thing. So she needs to have enough of her own masculine energy. But generally, if you find yourself, you know, if this hyper feminine profile, wounded feminine profile describes you, and you find yourself getting into relationships with you know, over dominant left brain imbalanced masculine dominator types, what was I going to say? Yeah, they will basically be an external manifestation of how you yourself, of your own masculine energy. So because your femininity is so hyper dominant, in order to balance yourself out, you would either need to balance yourself out by pushing yourself to the extreme opposite of hyper masculine dominance, just so that you can eventually come back into balance, because that's what's needed to heal you, that amount of masculine energy, or you're going to get into relationships with men like that who are going to balance you out naturally. Ultimately, those types of relationships are going to be toxic, because you're not speaking your truth, you're not listening to the wisdom of your own body. You have blockages in your throat chakra, probably because that's a masculine dominant chakra. That's why men have their dominance in that chakra physically manifests as an Adam's apple, because they're generally more comfortable with speaking their truth. So right. Okay, so on a macro, so this is what happens on a micro level when you, you know, get into the wounded feminine energy. On a micro level, it results in all of these problems, like, you know, low self-esteem, unworthiness, self-loathing. The energy tends to move inwards, so it tends to become self-destructive. Because, like I said, femininity is, you know, it's like that black hole. It's magnetic. It's like a vacuum. So the energy contracts and moves inwards. So you'll tend to see, you know, women who have problems with mental health, or feminine, and people who tend to be more in their feminine, having mental health problems, will tend to indulge more in self-harm, rather than, for example, like with the toxic masculine, they'll go and shoot up a school, because a masculine energy moves outwards. That's what masculine energy is like. That's why men have a lingam, because their energy moves outwards. So on a macro level, with societies that tend to be more right brain imbalance, more yin type societies, they tend to be more others orientated. So they're very much about families, about community, about sharing, and no sense of personal property. We see this a lot in indigenous societies that tend to be where the people generally have more melanin, because if you look into the science of melanin, the carbon type melanin is more yin, it's more feminine, it's more magnetic. So these societies have historically become dominated and colonized by societies that are more yang, because if you look at European societies, for example, with the sulfuric type melanin, that melanin is more electric in nature, which is yang, masculine energy. It's very individualistic, it's very capitalistic, it's very hierarchical. All of these things, they're about, you know, the sword rather than the chalice. They're about, you know, achieving, getting to the top, service to self rather than service to others. And these types of societies have historically dominated other societies, because they lack compassion, and, you know, just connecting to their emotions and connecting to the wisdom of their bodies, the wisdom of the earth. Even they become disconnected from the earth as well, because the earth is feminine, so they're more in alignment with kind of getting to the top, which is more about masculine energy. Right, so how do we heal this? And interestingly, and I've said this before, but because we live in a world, a universe which is holographic in nature, or fractal in nature, just by healing one quantum particle of the collective, you actually end up healing the entire collective, because it operates like a hologram, and a hologram contains, in each part contains the entire image of the whole. If you want to know more about that, read The Divine Matrix by Greg Braden. He kind of goes into quantum theory and how that works. So by healing ourselves, if you find yourself being either dominant in either aspect, and often as you go on the path of healing, you'll swing from one end of the pendulum to the other, from one pole to the other as the pendulum swings. That's the principle of rhythm and the principle of polarity. You'll go from hyperfemininity to being extremely in your masculine, and then eventually it will balance out. And I've been on this journey myself. It's been like more than 10 years. So it can take time, but as you start to heal yourself, you start to heal others around you, and eventually we will heal the world by doing this work. This is why they call this journey of self-actualization and self-realization the great work, because it heals the entire collective, it heals the universe, and brings everything back into balance. So the way that we heal this is by balancing with the masculine energy. So start to embody the masculine principles of self-defense, of courage, boundaries, like actually having boundaries, and action. So it's not enough to, you develop boundaries by connecting to the wisdom of your body. So that's the feminine. So when you're connecting, you feel your emotions in your body and experience them, and that's you connecting to your feminine. But when you speak them and speak your truth, that's when you actually start to connect the masculine and the feminine energies within yourself, and that's extremely attractive to a high value man or a high value partner who is self-actualized or close to it themselves. Because if you've got the spiritual alpha, as I talked before in my video, the incel revolution and the socially conditioned alpha, the spiritual alpha male and the spiritual alpha female are balanced in their masculine and feminine energies. They still have they know how to polarize themselves within a relationship to keep that kind of sexual attractiveness, but they also are, like, the woman has integrated her own masculine energy. She doesn't have woundings around the masculine, and the masculine has also embodied his own and connected to his own femininity, so he's able to show up as a respectful partner for his feminine energy partner. So being able to speak your truth and put up boundaries if something isn't in alignment with what you want, is extremely attractive to somebody who is also embodying that same energy. So a man who's in touch with his own feelings as well will find it extremely attractive, knowing that you have enough of your own masculine energy, that you don't need him, you just choose to be with him. So yeah, so not just stating your boundaries, but also implementing action if your boundaries are violated. So I do think that if this is, you know, if you're having problems with embodying your masculine energy and you're too much in your feminine energy, then working on both your solar plexus and your throat chakra is really, really helpful, because these chakras tend to be less dominant in women. So your solar plexus, your manipura, is the seat of your self-esteem, it's the seat of your self-confidence, it's the seat of your personal power, and your boundaries as well. So working with crystals is definitely useful. I mean, on a physical level, working with crystals and essential oils will definitely help. So tiger's eye, citrine, just yellow stones in general, citrusy essential oils will help, but you really, really do have to work on some of your limiting beliefs around masculine energy and around speaking your truth, and some of your fears around that. And that's not something that happens overnight, that's something that takes time. So shadow work's really important for that. Also, sitting outside in the sun is yang, it's masculine energy, it energizes us, the moon is yin. And for your throat chakra, stones like lapis, I love labradorite. Labradorite reveals hidden truths, so it's a really, really good stone for helping you speak your truth. That's why you see the flashes of blue inside it. It's revealing those hidden truths within. Turquoise is also a beautiful stone. It helps to unblock the throat chakra, and it's also very, very good for psychic protection. So protection is a sacred masculine principle. Essential oils such as lavender, frankincense, tea tree, peppermint, and eucalyptus all help with that throat chakra. And then you can also do just cleansing and activating meditations. There's loads of them here on YouTube. Like, it's not something that you need to, I mean, you can really empower yourself and be your own healer. Just put on a guided meditation, chakra balancing, binaural beats and healing frequencies can be wonderful for kind of doing work on your chakras. But yeah, just generally, I think just studying this stuff as much as possible and setting the intention to heal, if this is something that you have a problem with, is really, really an important place to start, because like I said, as we heal ourselves, we end up healing the collective. So I think that's about it. That's all I want to say. It's always a little bit of a brain dump whenever I do these videos, but I hope I covered everything. I am going to be doing more videos now that I'm here and a bit more settled here in Bali. I am going to be a little bit busy with the traveling schedule, because I'm only here for 2 months this time, and this is my shortest trip to Bali ever. But hopefully I'm going to do 1 or 2 more videos before I leave, and then I'm going to Lahore. So yeah, let me know if you have suggestions for other videos. If you've got questions related to this video, please leave them in the comment box below. I love you all, and thank you so much for your patience, because I did take quite a long break between the last video. It was very enjoyable. I've just been enjoying the island, and yeah, I'm going to enjoy this wonderful house that I'm staying in. I might even put a little video bit at the end to show you what it looks like. No, I'm not going to do that actually. Just watch my Insta stories. You'll just get the down low on the Insta stories. So if you're not following me on Instagram already, it's at Ishtar the Moon, because I'm not going to edit this video. I'm literally just going to upload it straight to YouTube, because I'm just not going to give myself any more excuses to not make videos, and the whole editing process is definitely slowing me down. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm going to love you and leave you, and one love. See you in the next video.